Hello and welcome to the state of Kentucky. I'm Bruce Maples, publisher of Forward Kentucky, and we're really glad to have you with us today. If you are watching this live, we're glad you're with us. If you're watching this recorded, thank you for stopping by and taking the time to do that. I spent about 2 decades of my life in the corporate world, first with my own company and then working for a large company here in Kentucky. And part of that time, I was a manager of a team. And part of obviously being a manager is you have to hire people. And so you get resumes all the time. And some of them you think, that's pretty cool. And some of them you're like, just wow, look at that. So I want to tell you about somebody's resume here. Let's see. This person is a graduate of Berea College. Went to Salmon Chase College of Law, is admitted to the Kentucky Bar and is a lawyer. This person has worked with Legal Aid of Bluegrass, Kentucky Equal Justice Center, the House Democratic Caucus, and now works at Kentucky Voices for Health. And if you're sitting there thinking, wait a minute, if this person has that kind of educational background, why in the world did they go into the nonprofit and advocacy world and not get some job, at a highfalutin 25th floor law firm and make scads of money? So that's what we're going to talk about today, or at least that's part of what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to welcome Cara Stewart to the state of Kentucky. Welcome to the state of Kentucky, Cara.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is it feels so strange. Like, okay, we'll talk about my resume. That's weird. We'll do it.
Well, but when you read it, it's impressive. It's an impressive resume. So where are you?
I'm at my home at the head of Osplan Holler in Floyd County, Kentucky, which is where I grew up and where I have been since I left Frankfort in May.
Okay. Yeah, you left right in the middle of the pandemic, so
yeah,
you got to go somewhere. That's right.
Well, I still, I have a home in Covington and Main Strasse that I love, but turns out the benefits of living in the city in the times of COVID are pretty low. Yeah. It's just temptation and you don't want to go anywhere. And also I didn't want my mom to go to the store and I could work from home here. Yep. So I just came home and have been here ever since.
Cool. Before we go any further, let me share this information that if you comment on Facebook or YouTube, we can see the comments and we may even show them in the broadcast. And if you have a question for Cara, post it in the comments on Facebook or YouTube and we'll bring it up. And we already have some comments. So there's some family member here that says that she's having her car service. So she's going to try and watch while she's having her car service, which is great.
That's my Aunt Rebecca. I can see it pop up there.
Yeah. So
she's newly returned to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. By the way, I love the pun in your name with the state of Kentucky.
Yes.
It's excellent. So she's been living in Florida for like her entire adult life and just a couple of months ago came back.
So let me ask you this. Let's just go right to the, and yes, my clock is late. Let's go right to the question that I started with, which is, why would you go to the trouble of getting a law degree, which is not an easy thing to do, and passing the bar, and then start working for these nonprofits? What's the point there?
Justice is the point, and to me, like it's a very easy question. In fact, I could struggle more with answering how to ethically consider private practice as a profession more than being torn to not do public interest law. Yes, I did have a law degree and make $30,000 with that law degree, less than my husband, who is a public school teacher, who are also, notably underpaid. And I didn't think twice about it, right? I mean, there wasn't really another option that made sense to me, because if you want to do justice work and I'm an anti-capitalist and I want to eliminate poverty, and I'm not sure how to do that. There is a path to do that, like the Bill Gates sort of style, like try to be the greatest capitalist you can. But that wasn't my path. I knew that wasn't possible for me, so I took a different path to do the same work.
Well, let's back up a little bit. It sounds like you knew that this was what you wanted to do before the law degree. Was this a passion like in high school and college?
I don't really remember having any awareness of anything in high school, and I'm very impressed by the teenagers who do. I mean, I'm sure I did. I mean, I was in youth and government. I did KYA, and like I ran for attorney general in KYA when I was in high school, but I just don't remember having what my level of political awareness was.
Right.
But yeah, I've always been outraged by injustice, and always felt that they're like, what am I doing? I can't, sit idly by when there's injustice around me, and I consider poverty, a policy enforced injustice.
Well, let me go sideways just a minute, then I want to come back. If somebody is in that same space and they're in school, does it change the things you take in law school? Do you focus on different courses, or do you just get through it?
Bruce, law school is a scam, and law school is a really strangely nationalized program. So sure, you choose courses, but you don't your first year. Your first year, they're set nationally like this, and the books are set nationally. The American Bar Association approves the books. There's the red book or the blue book, and those are the books you get. They're either published by Lexis or West. I'm sure there was a public interest law chapter that was very active. I participated in it. None of that is particularly relevant to what you do after. It's kind of like how there's very few college majors that have any bearing on what you can do with your degree after. I mean, obviously, like nursing or engineering are very specific that put you on a specific path. But then there's 100 other liberal arts degrees that it doesn't tie you to any particular path.
Okay. So let's talk about your work. You came out of law school and went to work where?
I worked at Legal Aid of the Bluegrass all the way through law school. So I actually started there in the fall of 2005, the same year I started law school. So I stayed there, and I just changed jobs over and over again. And then at some point I was an attorney at Legal Aid of the Bluegrass, and I primarily did housing. I was the only housing attorney for the 8 Northern Kentucky counties for several years.
Wow.
So I did, and of course I did family law because it's legal aid, and so practically everybody did that.
I don't think that I have ever shared this, but I worked for Legal Aid in Louisville as their IT person.
Did you?
For a while, yes, and that was fun. We could talk all day about the computers they had.
And about the crime case management SQL. Oh, Lord have mercy.
Yes. So you worked at Legal Aid. You left there and went to the Equal Justice Center. Is that right?
I did, which is also a legal aid. It's just, rogue legal aid. It's unfunded legal aid.
Okay.
Right. So I worked at an LSC, Legal Services Corporation, because I'm not sure people know, but when it comes to civil things, no one's entitled to an attorney for anything civil, right? You can have your kids taken away. You can have your house taken away. You can have your car taken away. A lot of terrible things can happen to you. You can be, foreclosed or evicted, and you're not entitled to an attorney. So the only sort of path there for low-income people is typically legal services, and that's why there's the Legal Services Corporation, in theory, funds a legal services organization that covers every county in America. Now, that does not mean everyone who needs an attorney everywhere in America has access to one. It means, it's a very low percentage. You could make a strong argument that it's about 1 in 10 that actually get an attorney that goes to court with them. But there's a lot of other services in between that happen for a lot of more people. But then, I moved to KJC, which does not get LSC money, because that LSC, Legal Services Corporation money, comes with a gazillion strings, including no class actions, including you can't represent anyone who's undocumented for any reason, including you can't lobby. So like the list is long, and KJC, not taking government money, doesn't have those restrictions. So the ACA had passed, and my current boss, Dick Cullison, who's still out there fighting the good fight, he's retired but using his hours for justice right now. He kept saying to us at work that, it was going to be the greatest transfer of wealth, the greatest anti-poverty law that was going to happen in our lifetime. And I thought, well, I think he's right. I'm going to get in on it. So I applied to be the health law fellow at Kentucky Equal Justice Center. which
So
we're now.
how many people work at KEJC?
So it's grown a lot in the last few years. So when I started there, I think we had three paid attorneys and one full-time. Marilyn Daniel, who is an unpaid full-time volunteer who has been doing justice work for a long time, very dedicated. But we had an immigration attorney, Anne Marie Reagan, 4, and then Mackenzie Cantrell, employment law, 4. So 4 lawyers. Now there are more, and Ben Carter is a litigation director there. So it's grown since I was there.
Good. I know Anne Marie from before, from Legal Aid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tell me about any memorable work or memorable cases that you did at either of those 2 places.
Well, I mean, I have 100 very, very memorable. I'll use one example for each. The example for Legal Aid, the Bluegrass, which does, day-to-day action, individual case handling. And I did a very high volume individual case handling.
Right.
In Kentucky, we don't have landlord-tenant law in most of the state. Like we don't have, so URLTA, the Uniform Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, if you were to Google evictions or security deposits, you'd come up with that and it'd be KRS. And you'd think, oh, this is the law that applies. And you'd be wrong. It only applies in 4 counties and 13 to 19 jurisdictions. I only have actual paper evidence of the 13. So it's confusing, but it doesn't apply unless it's adopted by your municipality. And so in Northern Kentucky, there's a lot of those municipalities, but you could be on the same street in the same town and in the same courtroom with the same judge, with the same landlord, and have different law apply to you altogether.
Wow.
Very confusing, very frustrating. And without that law, we do not have habitability in Kentucky, which means if you're entering into the business of renting a property to be lived in, it does not have to be able to be lived in for you to do that at market rent. Seems insane and unjust, but it's true. And I had a case from a veteran who was a man who was living on his own out in Boone County in a non-URLTA jurisdiction, so no habitability. And there were holes in his walls and holes in his floors. And, he carried water to be able to flush the toilet, didn't really have running water to the bathroom. And you think, why would somebody live there? Well, he'd lived there for 20 years by himself and he was disabled. Right. And the landlord just never fixed anything. And so it just fell down around him. And so there were animals being able to come in, and the landlord had no duty to remedy any of that. And he had no legal right to not pay his market rent, which I thought was actually above market. So what do you do in that situation? He's on a fixed income, never going to be able to save a full month's rent to be able to do a deposit and the move-in costs. And it just, that one sat with me so hard. There is no way for the law to fix this situation. Mm-hmm. If he doesn't pay his rent, he'll be evicted for non-payment. And so, we try to be real creative and bring an affirmative case to try to force the judge's hands at equity. Right. Unfortunately, that man, he died before we got heard in court for the first time, and he didn't have an estate that we could continue it with. And it haunts me that. I'm convinced that the living conditions he was in contributed to his death.
Sure.
I'm convinced the open air, the open fire that he used to heat in the winter in his living room with a pipe going out of the open air, I'm convinced of it. So the URLTA and habitability is what all of my cases that stand out the most from that work. And then from KJC, there's nothing I could say other than Stewart v. Azar, which was the case that we filed against the federal government, against the Trump administration, to prevent the approval and then the implementation of Matt Bevin's Medicaid 1115 waiver of Kentucky Health, which was just a cruel approach to dismantle and defund Medicaid and take Medicaid away from, hundreds of thousands of Kentuckians unjustly.
Well, I have to say, I was aware of the lawsuit, obviously, because I followed it. I was not aware that your name was on it.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was my case, but now the Stewart and Stewart v. Azar is not me. I was the attorney, not the plaintiff.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just, so, it was a class action on behalf of all 1.4 million Kentuckians with Medicaid. We had, 15 or so plaintiffs both times. There were 2 lawsuits. And, I did a lot of work finding those plaintiffs and recruiting them. And making all of that happen, which is actually quite a bit of work. And like, for example, like Arkansas wasn't able to get theirs filed in time and prevent their implementation. So they had a similar 1115 implemented because they didn't have plaintiffs to file a lawsuit. So that was some work that we were able to do with partners like KFTC and grassroots groups across the state that really helped us reach out and use existing relationships and Kentucky Voices for Health, where I am now, to find those plaintiffs who are willing to be brave Kentuckians and put their names on that lawsuit. And then they were rewarded for that by being sued by their then governor. Yes, Matt Bevin sued his own constituents for daring to challenge the approval of that paperwork requirement lawsuit, Medicaid waiver.
But you won.
We won twice. Yeah. And yeah, there. To win, like it's not a close call.
Yep. So let me remind people again that if they comment, we can see the comments and we may show them. We have one comment here that I want to show, and that is best advocate in Kentucky. So I think that's probably true. You won that case. So that's good stuff. So I have to ask now, so you're doing this work that is meaningful and important, and you leave there to go work in the General Assembly, to go work in the legislature. Why did you do that?
Because Joni Jenkins and Rocky Adkins asked me.
Why did I suspect that was the answer? Well, say more about that.
I mean, it was an amazing opportunity that I would do again in a heartbeat. And it was a very difficult, very fulfilling, fun job. So the job, I mean, which I didn't know existed. I mean, did you know that job existed? Because I didn't. I was the chief of staff for the House Democratic Caucus. And I knew Joanna Decker from long before when I was at KJC. I knew some of these people, but I didn't really understand the structure of how partisan staff worked or how the legislature. I knew I'd been a lobbyist for years. I've been there every day for years. I knew a lot about it, but like Rocky told me when we were first talking about it, there's nothing can prepare you for being on the floor, and he's right. Nothing can prepare you for being on the floor and the intensity and what happens.
Yeah. I know you got to work closely, obviously, with Joni and Rocky, who are two of my favorite people. So let me ask you a couple of questions about that experience. First of all, tell me, I don't want you to name names, but were there people who were difficult to work with? Were there legislators, or did they all treat you fairly nicely?
Oh, legislators. Yeah. So I didn't ever have any sort of problem with legislators, really. I mean, things get very tense and, and people like, you're not at your best when you've been there 16 hours and there's so much pressure. No one's at their most kind, but so those sorts of things happened. But all in all, no, it was never the legislators. But so the structure of the place is that you've got our nonpartisan LRC, right? The Legislative Research Commission, the business of the whole functioning of our state government. And then you've got these partisan staff offices that support the four caucuses. And the challenging part was managing that dynamic and that sort of power struggle that existed, because when I started, the nonpartisan LRC director was also the partisan chief of staff for the House Republicans.
Yes.
So, and every time I had any sort of problem and, he would say, well, I have my nonpartisan hat on. It's like, you know, I have a nonpartisan hat in these roles. So that was actually the difficult part. And because you also, when I was hired by Rocky Adkins. Again, Joni Jenkins is who made that happen and made that introduction. And he and Derek Graham and Joni agreed to hire me. But then I actually worked for the Speaker of the House, David Osborne. So, yeah, so all of the Democratic partisan employees work I was told often, at the pleasure of the speaker.
I did not know that.
Yeah, isn't that fun? It makes no sense whatsoever. It should be completely autonomous. And so in the past, it did act that way, you know. So I reached out to past Democratic speakers and past Democratic chiefs of staff and asked about hiring and raises and how firings and all those sorts of things and how they worked.
Right.
And I couldn't find any evidence of any Democratic speaker or chief of staff ever having denied any requests from the Republicans when they were a minority. So it did sort of function autonomously on some level, but it wasn't autonomous, not when the Democrats were in charge either. It definitely still, you have to have, so, you know, like when I got denied $1 piece of foam board to print a sign on, it was by the nonpartisan LRC director, who was also the partisan chief of staff of the Republicans. And when I had to send 17 emails back and forth to request things that cost less than $5 on a regular basis, that was why, and then still be, you know, denied. There was no like basic budget. You know, I proposed that, you know, there'd be a max per month, a max per year, a max per item, all layered so that there couldn't be any abuses. But instead, it was every single approval had to go through the House Republicans.
Wow. I honestly, and I don't think many people know that. So
it's very like inside baseball, and like, why would anyone know it? I mean, why would you, you know, but it actually directly affects your functioning of government.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this then. I said, don't name names about people who were difficult. What about people who were good to work with? Are there any particular stories about legislators or staff members or anything that you would like to share?
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, Senate Bill 150 last session was just was wonderful with Representative Rachel Roberts, Representative Kim Mosier, and Jason Petrie to work, and Brett Rowland to work with them on that was a dream. You know, it was great. It was fast and furious, which is my personal, like, I'd rather go faster, never slower, even to my detriment. But you know, I love working through the very specific details. Joni Jenkins loves policy and she loves the details of it. And I love that too. You know, unfortunately, like, that rarely matters in the public discourse. Right. It was still really great to get to try to figure those things out. Really, most of the members of the House Democrats were really wonderful to get to talk to about, you know, what's possible, what could we do, what about something that's like just we know it's not going to pass, we know it's not even going to be heard, but for the purposes of messaging and letting people know this would be a good policy, starting that conversation, right, and working with people to figure out what that should be, and lots of bills, especially with Representative Attica Scott, for that particular purpose, and lots of legislators. But yeah, all in all, I would say the majority are good. You know, it's a strange little world. It's a strange little, where when you're in it, you think that everyone sees and knows everything that you're doing, and that's of course not true. And it's very difficult to keep in mind or have a perspective over how only 1% of it is ever going to be seen or heard or noticed. Yeah. Right. It's so hard. I mean, and then I think about like all of the wonderful, wonderful things like Representative Mackenzie Cantrell, who was also my colleague at KJC, you know, that she would say and do, and then someone would grab just like 1 10-second strange clip, and then that would be the thing for a month that came out of her legislating, and it just crushing.
So I have a comment to share. Sherlyn Stevenson says, "We miss her terribly. She was excellent." So, and there are some other people commenting that I think are from the legislature. So I think you left something there. So let's talk about that. We have a question here. Do you think your legacy lives on? And is there a particular rising star you can think of?
So that's a hilarious question from Andrew Wilhoit, who is the general counsel at the Senate Democrats, who I would be remiss to not point out that is also single. If there's any ladies watching the show, he always likes for me to point that out. He is very smart and definitely a rising star, along with most of the staff. I mean, there's brilliant people. The director of communications for the House Democrats, Brian Wilkerson, is one of the funniest, smartest people I have ever known, and very few people get to know it. I mean, they get to see things that he writes, but you just have no idea how talented that man is and how he can channel the voices of everyone in the House Democrats and write a speech that is them, not him. He's spectacular. And Sarah Bowling and Joanna Decker, both of whom are still on staff with the House Democrats, are so talented. And like, they're just gems, I wish there were more, and I wish that it was equitable. And, that's the other thing, is how inequitable, whenever you've got the Republicans in charge. So like Joanna Decker, who was the general counsel, now that's Dallas Hurley, who's amazing. I don't even know how to do the math on how little she was paid, with way more experience than the House Republicans general counsel, who was paid way less than half. And he had other jobs and still does, which is pretty Googleable. Yeah. He was making $197,000 and had other full-time jobs and other out-of-state jobs. And, here she is with more experience making a tiny portion of that.
Apparently, there were other people watching who caught on to the Andrew Wilhoit comment from Stephanie Kingsley.
I mean, Andy's very it's well played, sir. Well played. So, and Representative Stevenson, I'm excited. I'm going to see, but here's the thing. She says that she misses me. She has an appointment with me next week to work on her surprise billing.
Good deal.
We still work together. We're still going to do good policy, and we're still going to make it happen. I mean, I have not had a week yet without a formal and informal meeting with multiple legislators.
Really?
So That's
cool. All right. So I have a serious question, and then I'm going to have a wrap-up question. So here's a serious question. What does it mean to you to be a Democrat in Kentucky?
Whew. Now he went all soft and then he went all hardball on it.
Yep.
It means to be a part of, the party that mostly fights for justice and cares about everyone and keeps their goggles looking for who we're not including, because that's really the difference. I deeply believe that most Republicans think that they are fighting for justice and making Kentucky better. I believe that. It's just that I think most of the time when they're looking at who that is, they're leaving a lot of people out on the sides, like just not seeing a lot of people in what that vision is. And so the solutions are targeted at certain people and would make the Commonwealth of Kentucky a more just place for those people, but not for all Kentuckians. And I try to focus on what policies would make sure that all Kentuckians are able to thrive regardless of race, place, age, ideology, etc.
So I have a question to sort of conclude with. Hold on just a minute. Eddie, come here. Come here. Sorry. You've got me doing this, and my wife is doing virtual counseling, and so who gets to deal with the dog,
Well, yeah, my husband is currently right now also teaching virtual school, and I've got 2 dogs on the table right behind my computer, but they're just like staring at me silently. So
okay, mine doesn't pay any attention to me, so that's okay.
I have a live audience.
So here's my sort of closing question. This is a tough time in the state, in the country. The comment you made about dealing with housing issues and all of the injustice that's still out there in our laws. How do you keep yourself going in this space? How do you maintain a smile on your face and hope in your heart? And how do you get up and do it every day?
Because there are still people that are being harmed by our bad policies. So there's no way not to do that. I mean, yikes, what's the alternative? You have to have hope as possible. And I know that having just policies is the right thing. And when you're on the right side of history, you're doing the right thing. It isn't hard to find energy to do that.
Yeah.
It's just not. I mean, I don't, does it get depressing? I mean, darn Donald Trump is our president. So yes, it's depressing. But also we come from the future here in Kentucky. We had Matt Bevin before there was Donald Trump. We had someone who swore up and down and ran on that they were going to, unexpand Medicaid and dismantle our marketplace and take away health care from Kentuckians. And he wasn't able to do it, even with a supermajority Republican in both chambers, many of whom had also said they would do the same. And then when push came to shove, didn't, because it was the wrong thing to do. And the right policy for their constituents was to keep expanded Medicaid, which it means I feel the same way. And so I went to like national conferences in 2015 and 2016 and said, look, they're not going to repeal the ACA. And everybody's like, you have no way of knowing that. I'm like, I do. I'm from the future. I'm from Kentucky. I know we've already had this same situation and it didn't happen. So it's not going to happen here either. And it didn't. And I feel like we're going to recover as a country in a similar fashion that we are on the path here in Kentucky. We're on the path to recovery. There has been a little bit of an interruption with this global pandemic that's thrown chaos into everything. But
I think on that note, we ought to end. We are going to recover in Kentucky, in the country, and with people like Cara Stewart pushing it out there, we've got hope. So, Cara Stewart, thank you so much for being with us. You have been and remain one of my favorite people. So,
Bruce, thank you.
Thank you for being on the state of Kentucky, and good luck with your job and your work.
Thanks for having this show. And, I'm always appreciative of people that are, especially when you have policy folks on, have those policy people on to help people understand about what's going on. Well,
I'm a policy nerd too, so that's one reason I do this. Cara Stewart, thank you so much. Bye-bye. That was Cara Stewart, who has worked in a number of nonprofit and in the legislature and is now at Kentucky Voices for Health. We are really thankful that she joined us, and we appreciate her and appreciate her work. Next week, we are going to have Charles Booker with us to talk about his campaign and his current work with Hood to the Holler. So we hope you'll tune in then. Until then, this is Bruce Maples saying thanks for being with us, and let's hope that we can recover the way that Cara has said. Thanks a lot.